The silence in our house had a texture. It was thick and heavy, woven from the threads of routine and unspoken things. It settled over the bone-white quartz of our kitchen island, clung to the plush gray fabric of our sofa, and pooled in the space between me and my husband. My name is Kala. I'm 32, an age that feels suspended between the frantic energy of my 20s and the settled calm I'm supposed to have by now. By day, I'm an account manager at a mid-sized insurance firm, a job that is exactly as thrilling as it sounds. But tonight, and most nights recently, my title is simply Watcher. I watch my husband Reese as he becomes a silhouette against the glow of his laptop, his shoulders hunched in concentration. He is a good man, a stable man, the sturdy oak tree I chose to build a life under. But sometimes, standing under an oak tree just feels like living in a shadow. I swirled the last of the Cabernet in my glass, watching the deep red liquid coat the sides. Reese sat opposite me at the dinner table, his plate long empty, his focus entirely on the glowing screen of his work laptop. At 34, he was a senior cybersecurity analyst, a title that sounded impressive and important, though I couldn't explain what it entailed any more than I could decipher the lines of code that scrolled past his eyes. He provided. He was responsible, but he was also absent, even when he was right in front of me. Our marriage, now 6 years old, was a well-oiled machine. We woke at the same time, we left for our respectable jobs, and we came home. But lately, the machine felt cold. The engine was running, but the passenger cabin was freezing. Reese would come home, his mind still tangled in digital firewalls and encrypted threats, and disappear into his office to decompress. Decompression usually involved more screens, more keyboards, more worlds I wasn't a part of. We were roommates who shared a mortgage and a bed, but the space between us had grown into a vast, uncharted territory. I was lonely. It was a simple, stark truth that had taken root in the fertile soil of our silence, and I was bored. Bored of the same conversations about his work stress, my mundane office politics, and what to watch on Netflix before falling into a passionless sleep. That's when the ghost appeared. A notification, a tiny red circle on my Facebook app, a name I hadn't typed or spoken aloud in almost a decade. Julian. Hey stranger, the message read. Life treating you well? My heart did a strange little flip, a flutter of phantom limbs remembering how to fly. Julian. He was Reese's friend from college, which is how we'd all met, a loose thread connecting my past to my present. He was the whirlwind. Reese was the anchor. Back then, I had convinced myself I needed the anchor. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the message bubble. Replying felt like a small betrayal, though I couldn't articulate why. It was just a message. But I knew Reese would find it strange. Their friendship had cooled over the years, strained by the unspoken awkwardness of one friend marrying another's ex. But the silence in the room was pressing in on me, and the digital ping from my phone felt like a lifeline. Julian! Wow! A voice from the past. I typed back, trying to keep it light. Life's good. Quiet. Married. Can you believe it? To Reese, right? He replied almost instantly. Saw some pictures. He locked it down. Smart man. The compliment, indirect as it was, warmed me in a way I hadn't felt in years. We started chatting, first about the old days, then about our lives now. His life was a collage of freelance graphic design projects, travel, and late-night concerts. Mine was a spreadsheet of premium calculations and scheduled appointments. He remembered I took my coffee with oat milk and a dash of cinnamon, something Reese constantly forgot, defaulting to cream and sugar every time. He asked for my opinion on a logo he was designing, making me feel like my thoughts had value beyond which brand of paper towels to buy. The conversations became a secret garden I tended to every day. I'd find myself reaching for my phone first thing in the morning, a Pavlovian response to the hope of seeing his name on my screen. Who are you texting so much? Reese asked one evening, his eyes finally lifting from his laptop. Oh, just Maeve from work. I lied, the words slipping out with an ease that startled me. She's having drama with her landlord again. Reese grunted, a sound of vague acknowledgement, and his attention was already back on his screen. He didn't press. He trusted me. The thought sent a pang of guilt through me, but it was quickly washed away by the thrill of my secret. A week later, Julian wrote, I'm in your part of town for a meeting tomorrow. Coffee? for old time's sake. I knew I should say no. I knew it was a line. But the silence in my house was screaming, and Julian's invitation was a melody I couldn't resist. "I'd love that," I typed, my heart pounding a frantic, treacherous rhythm against my ribs. For old time's sake. The coffee shop was neutral ground, a place of bright lights and the comforting aroma of roasted beans. It felt innocent. Seeing Julian in person, however, was anything but. He was still handsome, almost unfairly so. The years had sharpened the angles of his jaw and added a confidence to his smile that was devastating. He stood up when he saw me, his eyes crinkling at the corners, and gave me a hug that felt both familiar and electrifying. "Kala," he said, his voice a low rumble, "you haven't aged a day." The coffee was supposed to be a one-off, a harmless trip down memory lane. But it bled into a lunch the following week, then after-work drinks at a dimly lit bar where the conversation flowed as easily as the wine. With Julian, I wasn't just Reese's wife or Kala from the insurance office. I was interesting. I was funny. I was seen. He'd listen, his eyes locked on mine, as I talked about my silly, unrealized dream of opening a small pottery studio. Reese would have called it impractical. Julian called it inspiring. The lies to Reese became a second language. A late meeting, drinks with the girls, a yoga class that ran long. Each one chipped away at my conscience, but the guilt was a small price to pay for the feeling of being alive again. I was living a double life, and the secrecy was a potent drug. My friend Maeve, whose name I had so easily used as an alibi, noticed the change in me. We were at our desks, and she watched me smile down at my phone as another text from Julian came through. "You've been taking a lot of long lunches lately," she said, her tone gentle but pointed. "And you have this glow. Is everything okay with you and Reese?" I felt a flush of defensiveness. "Everything's fine, just busy." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Be careful, Kala. This looks a lot like the beginning of something you can't undo." "You're being dramatic," I scoffed, turning back to my computer. "He's just an old friend." But I was telling myself the same lie I was telling her. The truth was, the line between friendship and something more had become so blurred, I couldn't see it anymore. The definitive crossing happened on a Tuesday in October. Reese was at a 3-day cybersecurity conference in Chicago. The house felt cavernous without him, the silence no longer just heavy, but haunting. I was making pasta, the radio playing softly, when I impulsively texted Julian. "House to myself tonight, bored. Want to crash my pity party?" He replied with a single word. "On me way." He brought a bottle of expensive red wine and a story about a ridiculous client that made me laugh until my sides hurt. We sat on the couch, the music turned up, the wine glasses perpetually refilled. We talked for hours, our knees occasionally brushing, the space between us shrinking with every passing minute until his arm was resting on the back of the sofa behind me. Nothing physical happened, not in the way that would be impossible to deny. But the intention was there, hanging in the air between us, thick and charged. When he finally left, well after 2 a.m., he pulled me into a hug at the front door. It lasted a second too long, his hand resting on the small of my back, his face buried in my hair. It was a hug that knew it wanted to be a kiss. As he pulled away, my fingers were already closing around the spare key on the hook by the door. I don't know what possessed me. It was a reckless, insane impulse, born from wine and loneliness and a desperate desire to keep this feeling alive. "Here," I whispered, pressing the cold metal into his palm. "In case you want to drop by again sometime." He looked down at the key, then back up at me. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The look we exchanged said everything words couldn't. It was a pact, a promise of shared secrets. As I closed the door behind him, the lock clicking into place, I felt a dizzying mix of terror and triumph. I had just given another man a key to the home I shared with my husband. The line hadn't just been blurred, I had erased it completely. In some twisted way, I think I wanted to get caught. The thrill of the secret was starting to curdle into the anxiety of maintaining it, and a part of me craved the explosion that would force a resolution. I began to push the boundaries, dropping Julian's name into conversations with Reese with a casualness that was entirely fabricated. Julian thought that movie was incredible. I'd say over dinner, watching for a reaction. Reese's jaw would tighten almost imperceptibly, a tiny muscle twitching near his temple. He'd nod, murmur something non-committal, and the conversation would die. But I knew he was noticing. The breaking point came on a Sunday evening. I had mentioned Julian for the third time that day, referencing an article he'd sent me. Reese carefully placed his fork on his plate, the small clink of metal on ceramic echoing in the tense silence. "What's going on with you and Julian?" he asked. His voice was controlled, level, but his eyes, his kind, steady eyes, were filled with a hurt that made my stomach clench. I immediately went on the offensive, a cornered animal baring its teeth. "What do you mean? Are you spying on me? Checking my phone? Real nice, Reese. Real trusting." "I'm not checking your phone," he said, his calm unwavering. "I have eyes. I see how you hide your screen when I walk into the room. I see you smiling at texts at all hours. I'm not an idiot, Kala. I think you're paranoid and controlling." I shot back, turning it around on him. It was a cruel, calculated deflection. "Julian is just a friend. A friend who actually talks to me about things other than computer viruses and pays attention to me. Maybe you should try it sometime." The words hit him like a physical blow. He flinched, the color draining from his face. He didn't say another word for the rest of the night. The next morning, while the sound of the shower filled the bathroom, Reese did what I had been practically daring him to do. He picked up my phone from the nightstand. When I came out, wrapped in a towel, my hair dripping onto my shoulders, he was sitting on the edge of our bed, my phone in his hand. The look on his face was one of utter devastation. It was a look I would see in my nightmares for years to come. His voice was eerily calm, hollowed out. "Miss your touch. Can't stop thinking about last night." "What exactly am I supposed to think this means, Kala?" I snatched the phone from his hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Those are just words. We're flirty. It doesn't mean anything." The lie sounded pathetic even to my own ears. "You gave him a key to our house." It wasn't a question. He must have scrolled further, found the text where I'd told Julian where the key was. I froze, trapped. "For emergencies?" I lied weakly. "What emergency?" he asked, the hurt in his voice finally giving way to a cold, hard anger. "Would your ex-boyfriend possibly need to handle at our house?" The room felt small, airless. I couldn't breathe. "I want the key back," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And I want whatever this is to stop. Now. Today. Or we're done." An ultimatum. The finality of it terrified me. I wasn't ready to lose this life, this stability. I wasn't ready to lose Reese. Or maybe I was just terrified of being alone. "Okay," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. "Okay, I'll end it. I'll get the key back. I promise. We can work on us." He wanted to believe me so badly. I could see the desperate hope flicker in his shattered eyes. He nodded, a single, jerky movement. He pretended to believe me, and I pretended I was telling the truth. Reese tried. God, he really tried. He started leaving work at 5:30 on the dot, a feat I hadn't witnessed in years. He planned a weekend trip to the coast, suggesting we rent a cabin on the beach like we did on our honeymoon. One evening, he sat next to me on the couch, took my hand and said, "Maybe we should talk to someone. A therapist. For couples." His efforts should have made me feel relieved, hopeful. Instead, they felt like a cage. Every kind gesture, every attempt to reconnect, was a fresh reminder of my betrayal. The guilt was a physical weight in my chest, and it twisted, perversely, into resentment. How dare he try to fix this now, when I had already found an escape? The text between Julian and me never really stopped. I was more careful. I bought a cheap, prepaid phone, a burner phone, like some kind of criminal, and kept it in my desk drawer at work. I told Julian that Reese was being insecure and we needed to be more careful. I didn't end things. I just adjusted our approach. The breaking point, the final, catastrophic detonation, came about a month after Reese's ultimatum. It was a Tuesday. Reese called me around 2 p.m. at the office. "Hey," he said, his voice lighter than it had been in weeks. "My afternoon meeting just got canceled. I was thinking I'd come home early, and we could cook that paella recipe you bookmarked." Panic, cold and sharp, shot through me. I had already invited Julian to come by after work, assuming Reese would be late as usual. My mind raced, spinning a web of lies on the spot. "Oh, honey, that sounds amazing, but I can't," I said, injecting a fake sigh of frustration into my voice. We just had a massive claim come in. I'm going to be stuck here for hours. Oh, okay, he said, the disappointment evident. No problem. Another time. Then, as fate would have it, an hour later, my own phone buzzed. It was a text from Reese. Spoke too soon. The client rescheduled for this evening. Looks like I'm the one working late after all. Rain check on the paella. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. It was a sign. The universe wanted this to happen. I immediately texted Julian from my work phone. Coast is clear. We're back on. He came over around 6:30. We opened a bottle of wine, ordered Thai takeout, and settled onto the couch to watch a movie neither of us was paying attention to. His arm was draped around my shoulders, my head resting against his chest. It was a position of comfortable intimacy, one that could not be explained away as just friendly by any stretch of the imagination. We were playing house in a home that wasn't mine to share. And then I heard it. The low rumble of the garage door opening. A jolt went through me, pure, undiluted terror. Reese, I gasped, scrambling off the couch. But it was too late. The door from the garage opened, and he walked into the living room, briefcase in hand. He stopped dead. His eyes took in the scene, the takeout containers on the coffee table, the 2 half-empty wine glasses, Julian's jacket thrown casually over a chair, and us, frozen in our guilt. His face was a slow-motion car crash of emotion. It shifted from confusion to dawning realization to absolute, soul-crushing devastation in the space of 3 seconds. "What is this?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. "We were just watching a movie," I said weakly. The words sounded pathetic, absurd. "Look, man, it's not what it looks like," Julian started, using the most cliché, useless line in human history. Reese's gaze shifted to him, cold as ice. "It looks like you're getting cozy with my wife, on my couch, in my living room, while I'm supposed to be at work." His calm was more frightening than any shout. I jumped in, desperate to control the narrative, to somehow salvage the unsalvageable. "Nathan, you're overreacting. Julian and I are friends. We're allowed to hang out." "Friends," he repeated, the word hollow and dead. "Friends don't sit like that, Calla." And then I said it. The words that would echo in the ruins of my life, the final shovel of dirt on the coffin of our marriage. "I can invite whoever I want over," I said, my voice sharp with a defensive, misplaced indignation. "It's my house, too." As soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a catastrophic mistake. The hurt in his eyes solidified into something hard and final. He just stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then he turned to Julian. "I think you should leave." Julian grabbed his jacket and practically ran for the door, throwing me a fleeting, apologetic glance. He was a coward, and I had sacrificed everything for him. When we were alone, Reese finally looked at me again. "So this is what our marriage means to you," he said, his voice cracking. "This is how much respect you have for me. For us." "You're blowing this out of proportion," I insisted, grasping at straws. "Nothing happened." "Something's been happening for months," he finally yelled, his control shattering. "You've been lying to my face while I've been trying to save us. If you weren't so controlling about who I can be friends with." "Stop." His voice cut through my deflection like a blade. "This isn't about friendship. This is about you and him. Are you in love with him?" The direct question paralyzed me. I couldn't answer, and my silence was an answer in itself. "Do you love me at all anymore?" His voice broke. The machinery of lies kept churning. "Of course I love you." "But you love him too," he stated, not a question. Again I said nothing, and the silence told him everything. "I can't do this anymore, Calla," he said, his voice flat with exhaustion. "I'm done." He walked over to the armchair and sank into it, burying his head in his hands. The final, panicked words tumbled out of me. Blame, promises, desperate bargains. But it was too late. The damage was done. He looked up, his face aged and weary. "I think you should leave, Calla," he said, his voice unnervingly steady. "Go stay with a friend. Stay with Alex. I don't care, but I can't look at you right now." I stormed upstairs, throwing clothes into a bag in a self-righteous fury. When I came back down, he was still sitting there, a statue of grief. He didn't look up as I grabbed my purse and keys and walked out the door of the life I had just burned to the ground. I drove through the rain-slicked streets in a daze, tears blurring the traffic lights into halos of red and green. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I had been kicked out. But underneath the shock and the hurt, a tiny, defiant part of me felt a flicker of liberation. It was over. The lies, the sneaking around, the constant tension. It was finally out in the open. Now, I could be with Julian. In my mind, I had scripted this scene 100 times. I would show up at his door, tear-streaked and vulnerable. He would pull me into his arms, tell me everything would be okay, that this was what he wanted all along. We were finally free. Reality, however, is a brutal screenwriter. When he opened the door to his apartment, he wasn't holding his arms open. He was holding a half-eaten bowl of cereal. He looked surprised, and then, unmistakably, uncomfortable. "Kala? What happened?" he asked, not immediately inviting me in. "Reese kicked me out," I said, my voice cracking, the pathetic story tumbling out of me. "He came home and saw us, and he just lost it." Julian's expression shifted from surprise to something like weariness. He ran a hand through his hair. "And you came here?" He hesitated before finally stepping aside to let me into his cluttered bachelor pad. "Can I stay here tonight?" I asked, setting my hastily packed bag on the floor. "Just until I figure things out." "Yeah, of course," he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "You can take the bed. I'll sleep on the couch." That wasn't the response I'd expected. In my fantasy, this was the moment our real life together began. This was supposed to be romantic, passionate. Instead, it felt awkward and forced. "I thought you'd be happy about this," I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "We've been talking about being together for months." "Talking about it, yeah," he agreed cautiously, avoiding my eyes. "But I didn't think it would happen like this. I didn't think you'd actually leave him." A cold dread began to seep into my bones, chilling me more than the rain outside. "What are you saying, Julian?" He sighed, the sound heavy with the discomfort he was no longer trying to hide. "Kala, I like you. I've always liked you. But I thought we were just having fun, you know. I didn't think you'd blow up your marriage over it." "Just having fun?" I repeated, my voice rising. The words felt like shards of glass in my mouth. "We've been texting constantly for months. You told me you missed me, that we should have never broken up. You sent me songs. You let me give you a key to my house." I know," he said, holding his hands up defensively. "And I meant it, in the moment. But there's a big difference between flirting with a married woman and actually having her show up at your door expecting to move in." I felt like I was going to be sick. The entire foundation of the new life I thought I was building cracked and crumbled beneath me. So all of this, all the messages, the meetups, everything, that was just a game to you? "It wasn't a game," he insisted, though his words rang hollow. "But it wasn't. This. I never asked you to leave Reese." I sat down hard on his lumpy couch, the reality of my situation crashing down on me with the force of a physical blow. I had detonated my marriage. I had torched my home, my security, my husband's heart. And for what? For a fantasy. For a man who saw me not as a partner, but as a pleasant diversion. The next few months were a blur of hotel rooms I couldn't afford and desperate apartment hunting. The cold reality of starting over at 32 was brutal. Without Reese's income, my salary from the insurance office was barely enough to cover rent on a tiny one-bedroom apartment with paper-thin walls. Our joint accounts were frozen pending legal discussions, and I had to drain my meager personal savings just to cover the security deposit and first month's rent. I arranged times via text with Reese to pick up my things from the house while he was at work. Walking through those rooms, packing my life into cardboard boxes while the scent of his coffee still lingered in the air, was a special kind of torture. Julian had completely ghosted me after that first night. No calls, no texts, nothing. My pride, what little I had left, kept me from pushing further. I had already humiliated myself enough. I had traded a king for a joker, and the joke was on me. 6 months after everything fell apart, I sent Reese a text. "Can we talk? Coffee?" My treat. I wasn't sure he'd even reply, but he did, with a simple, "Okay, name the place." We met at a neutral cafe halfway between my sad little apartment and the new place he was renting. He looked good. Better than good, actually. He looked healthy. Like he'd been working out more, sleeping better. The perpetual shadow of stress that used to live under his eyes was gone. He looked free. Reese. I started, my voice unsteady. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For Julian. For lying. For all of it. He nodded, his expression unreadable as he stirred his black coffee. I appreciate that, Calla. I made a huge mistake. I continued, the words I'd rehearsed 1,000 times spilling out. I threw away everything good in my life for some stupid fantasy that wasn't even real. What happened with Julian? He finally asked, his curiosity clinical, detached. I let out a bitter laugh. Nothing happened with Julian. He didn't want a relationship, just the thrill of sneaking around. The minute I showed up at his door, actually available, he couldn't get rid of me fast enough. He nodded again, a flicker of something pity, perhaps in his eyes. I took a deep breath and asked the question I had to ask, the one I already knew the answer to. Do you think, is there any chance at all that we could try again? I know I don't deserve it, but I still love you, Reese. The look he gave me was a mixture of pity and resolve. It wasn't cruel, just final. I think you love the idea of me, Calla, he said softly. The stability, the comfort, the life we had. But if you really loved me specifically, not just what I provided, you wouldn't have done what you did. I couldn't argue with his logic as much as I wanted to. People make mistakes, I whispered. Even big ones they do, he agreed. And sometimes, those mistakes have permanent consequences. I can forgive you, Calla, I really can. But I can't forget. And I can't go back to not knowing what I know now. That when things got hard, you looked elsewhere instead of toward me. Oh, the divorce was finalized 3 months later. Reese took a new job opportunity in Seattle. And just like that, 6 years of marriage evaporated, leaving behind only occasional social media updates and a box of wedding photos I couldn't bring myself to look at or to throw away. About a year after the divorce, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Hey stranger, life treating you well? Julian. The exact same opener. The same bait on the same hook. It was amazing, the audacity. I stared at the message, a cold, clear anger replacing any lingering hurt. He hadn't learned a thing, but I had. I blocked his number without responding. A few weeks ago, Maeve and I were having lunch, and she gently slid her phone across the table. It was a picture from Reese's Instagram. Him, standing on a mountain peak somewhere near Seattle, his arm around a smiling woman with kind eyes. The caption read, "She said yes." He was engaged. I looked at their happy, windswept faces and felt a complicated mix of emotions, a deep, aching sadness for what I had lost, for the man I had failed to appreciate. But underneath it, surprisingly, was a genuine, quiet hope that he had found someone who could see him, really see him, in all the ways I had not. He deserved that happiness. As for me, I'm still figuring things out. I'm still learning to sit with my mistakes without letting them define me. I still wake up some mornings with a hollow ache in my chest. But I'm going to my pottery class every Thursday night. I'm being honest with Maeve when I'm having a hard day. For the first time in a long, long time, I am being honest with myself. It's not much, but it's a start.